How many times have you felt guilty about something that, deep down, wasn't your fault? Someone said to you, "You made me sad. You make me feel insecure," and you believed it. How many times have you accepted a small favor and then been held accountable as if you had signed an eternal debt? How many times have you been told you were selfish just because you dared to choose yourself? If you've ever experienced this, you weren't in a normal relationship. You were in a game where the manipulator smiles in silence and you pay the price without realizing it. Machiavelli knew this. Control is rarely exerted by visible chains. It is exerted by the invisible rope of guilt, the leash of debt, the whip of shame. And those who don't understand this game live obeying orders that were never given out loud. This video is about cutting those cords, about breaking the weapons others use against you. Because as long as you believe you're responsible for other people's emotions, that you owe them favors without a deadline, that you need to explain yourself so as not to appear selfish, you're a servant. But when you return the burden to those who placed it on you, the entire structure crumbles. So tell me, which of these manipulations have you felt most strongly in your life? Guilt, debt, or shame? Write in the comments, because naming the weapon that attacks you is the first step to disarming the enemy. And now, let's start with the first chain, the most subtle and the most common, the invisible rope that binds you without you even realizing it. The most efficient manipulation is not the one that shouts, but the one that whispers, "You hurt me. You make me feel this way. It's your fault." These phrases seem small, even like an innocent outburst, but they carry a silent trap, because the moment you accept them, you begin to carry a weight that was never yours. This is how family members turn love into a leash. Partners turn affection into blackmail. Friends turn coexistence into emotional debt. You begin to live trying not to disappoint, not to sadden, not to provoke insecurity in others. Your every step becomes measured by the thermometer of other people's moods. You no longer live. You merely manage emotions that aren't yours. Machiavelli would remind us, no prince governs if he carries the people's fears and insecurities on his shoulders. The leader governs because he establishes order, not because he assumes blame that does not belong to him. The servant, yes, apologizes for everything. The prince, no. The prince returns every emotion to its rightful owner. You need to understand, you don't cause feelings in anyone. You only awaken wounds that were already there. The sadness that the other person places upon you was born long before your gesture. The insecurity wasn't created by your words. It was already a long-standing crack. When someone says, "You made me feel this," what they're trying to do is transfer the pain they don't want to carry. And if you accept it, you become everyone's emotional dumping ground. The practice is clear and cold. When to listen. You made me feel. Don't bow down. Don't make automatic apologies. Answer, I understand that you felt that way. What exactly do you need to be different? This sentence does two things. It takes the weight off your shoulders, and it puts the responsibility back on whoever tried to put it on you. It's like being a puppet. As long as you believe you're responsible for other people's emotions, you dance on invisible strings. But the moment you cut the string, you realize the puppeteer has no real power. They only had the illusion that you would obey. And I want you to reflect. How many times this week alone have you apologized for something that wasn't yours? How many times have you believed you needed to change to make someone else feel better? This is the perfect portrait of the invisible string. Now, imagine cutting that thread. Imagine responding without guilt, just with clarity. What would change in your life if each emotion were returned to its rightful owner? Write in the comments. When did you realize you were carrying feelings that were never yours? This is the first thread that needs to be cut. And when you cut this invisible cord, you realize the second trap, the theater of debt. Because manipulating your emotions isn't enough, they'll also try to turn every favor into a chain letter. The second trap is even more insidious because it comes disguised as generosity. A friend does a small favor. A relative helps you with something simple. A colleague takes care of a detail. At the time, it seems like mere courtesy. But then, sooner or later, the charge comes. Remember what I did for you? Now it's your turn. This is the hidden contract of manipulation. The favor was never free. It was a calculated investment, a silent trap. You accepted a drop of water and now owe an ocean. What seemed like kindness reveals itself as a leash. And if you pay with obedience, you'll never escape that chain. Machiavelli would warn, those who depend on favors are always in a position of weakness. The prince who accepts help without criteria becomes a hostage to the helper. There is no real power when your autonomy depends on another's act of kindness. Debt is the most elegant form of slavery because you carry it with a smile on your face, believing you owe something. The trick is in how you respond. The manipulator expects you to bow down to the memory, but you have two cold and lethal solutions. The first, immediately return something small, breaking the spell instantly, a gesture that closes the account and leaves no room for future charges. The second, make it clear from the start, I appreciate it, but I won't be able to repay you the way you imagine. This sentence cuts off the contract before it is signed. Accepting help without thinking is like drinking a glass of wine offered at a banquet. You raise the glass, thinking you're celebrating, but deep down, the liquid is poison. The toast seems like a courtesy, but your throat is already stuck. Notice how this happens in small things. The neighbor who insists on fixing something in your house, but then uses it as a key to invade your routine. The relative who helps you financially once, but turns that gesture into a perpetual excuse to control your decisions. The colleague who fixes a detail at work and then claims to own your loyalty. They are all actors in the same theater, and the stage is your life. I want you to think now, when was the last time you accepted a favor and then realized you were being held accountable in ways you never agreed to? How many of those gifts came with a hidden leash? Write about this situation in the comments, because naming the theater is like stepping out of the role of an extra. It's choosing to no longer participate in the play. But if debt doesn't hold you back, they have another trick, a whip that weighs not on the body, but on the mind. The weapon of shame. This is perhaps the most common and cruel scam. You refuse a request, protect your time, impose a limit, and then comes the accusation. You only think about yourself. How inconsiderate. You're being selfish. Words spoken as if they were a sentence, as if you had committed a crime by prioritizing yourself. This is the invisible whip of shame. It doesn't leave marks on the body, but it conditions the mind. With each accusation, you feel tempted to give in, to backtrack, to prove you're not the monster they've painted you as. This is how the manipulator keeps you available. They don't need to command you, nor raise their voice. They just need to label you, and you're in charge of bending yourself. Machiavelli knew that those who fear labels live as slaves to their audience. The prince who rules doesn't ask whether he will be loved or hated. He decides what needs to be done, because in the end, A solid reputation is born from consistent actions, not from the approval of those who demand eternal availability. The truth is harsh. You're not selfish for saying no. You're responsible for protecting your energy, your time, your values. Anyone who shouts selfishness in front of you is actually angry because they've lost the free access they once had to you. This accusation is less about your attitude and more about the other person's dependence on your weakness. The answer here needs to be short, crisp, and indisputable. Never debate intentions. Don't try to explain why you can't. Don't apologize. Just say, it's not a question of selfishness. It's a question of limits. I won't do it today. The silence after this sentence is your weapon, because any debate that continues only serves to reinforce the leash. Consider the metaphor. A loud barking dog seems dangerous, but often has no teeth. The noise serves only to scare. If you back away, you confirm the power of the sound. If you remain firm, the bark loses strength and the dog falls silent. Now I ask you, how many times have you done something you didn't want to do just to avoid being labeled selfish? How many times have you failed to protect yourself because you didn't want to be misunderstood? This is the hallmark of the most effective manipulation. When the enemy can make you attack yourself. Write in the comments, when have you been called selfish for simply saying no? That's the scream of a toothless dog. And when you don't back down, the noise becomes silence. But if shame isn't enough, manipulators have another card up their sleeve, a weapon that doesn't scream but freezes, punitive silence, calculated to bend their will. This blow is cold. There's no yelling, no accusations, no direct demands, just emptiness, a partner who disappears for days, a friend who stops responding to messages, a family member who treats you as if you don't exist until you give in. At first glance, it seems like nothing more than distance or calm. But make no mistake, it's calculated punishment. This is the manipulator's strategic ice. He knows you fear abandonment. He knows that silence affects your mind more than any argument. While you try to understand what you did wrong, he watches silently, waiting for you to bow down, beg, apologize for something you don't even understand. Silence, here, isn't absence. It's a whip. Machiavelli would say this weapon only works on those who haven't yet learned to be self-sufficient. Silence hurts because you believe you need the other to exist. Those who have inner fire, who have built routine and autonomy, go through winter without fear. The manipulator expects to see you freeze, but finds stone and flame. The answer is brutal in its simplicity. Keep going. Continue your routine, your training, your work, your life. Don't seek, don't beg, don't give in. If the other person asks later, the answer is short. I noticed the silence. I went on my way. That's when the tables are turned, because the ice that should have you bent over backward actually shows that you don't need this false warm-up. Think of a stone castle in winter. The cold is outside, trying to penetrate the walls. But those with inner fire survive. Those who depend solely on the warmth of others freeze on the first night. This is the difference between the ruled and the ruler. One lives in fear of abandonment. The other turns solitude into a shield. Now reflect. How many times have you chased after someone who remained silent just to punish you? How many times have you given away power precisely because you couldn't stand the silence? Write in the comments. Naming this weakness is the first step to burning it, because punitive silence is only a weapon when you don't know how to get through winter. And when that trick no longer works, the manipulator resorts to the last card, the urgency trap. the fire that burns too fast for you to think. This is the rush trick. The manipulator doesn't want you to think, doesn't want you to analyze, doesn't want you to see through the trick. He wants you to react. That's why he uses sharp phrases. Decide now, or it's over. If I don't solve it today, I'll lose my patience. Last chance. Manufactured urgency is the cheapest scam, yet one of the most effective, because it hijacks your mind. Under pressure, you don't think, you just try to escape the immediate pain. And in that impulse, you give in to what you would never give calmly. The manipulator knows this. They don't have the advantage of facts, only speed. Machiavelli would remind us, hasty decisions are the perfect breeding ground for defeat. The prince who rushes falls into traps the enemy could never set in open field. The secret isn't to respond faster, it's not to respond under threat. The rule is ironclad. Never make a decision under an ultimatum. Never. If someone pressures you to choose now, the answer is already there. I'll decide tomorrow. This simple phrase breaks the spell. It takes control from the other person and returns it to you. Yes, it may hurt. Yes, it may generate accusations of indecision or coldness, but it's precisely this delay that destroys the theater of urgency. Think of a flash in the pan. It burns brightly for a few seconds, illuminating everything and frightening anyone who looks closely. But without solid wood, it goes out the next instant. That's what happens with pressure. It seems unbearable when lit, but if you resist it, it burns itself out. How many times have you made bad decisions because you gave in to someone's rush? How many times have you accepted unfair conditions, burdensome commitments, or toxic relationships just to avoid the immediate discomfort of urgency? Write in the comments. Naming these moments is seeing how haste has robbed you of your power, because the moment you learn to pause, the whole game changes. And this is where we arrive at the Machiavellian turn, when you stop reacting to the enemy's weapons and start turning the board around. So far, you've seen the cycle. The guilt that holds you like a puppet, the debt that becomes a leash, the shame that whips your mind, the silence that freezes your body, the urgency that steals your clarity. If you look closely, all these weapons have something in common. They don't attack your strength, they attack your emotions. The manipulator doesn't fight head-on. He forces you to bend alone. And that's precisely why Machiavelli would say, never fight with the enemy's weapons. If you try to justify yourself in the face of guilt, you've already lost. If you pay a debt you never signed, you've already lost. If you debate whether or not to be selfish, you've already lost. If you rush to fill the silence, you've already lost. If you make decisions in haste, you've already lost. Every time you step on stage, the audience is already against you. The turning point is to change the game. Don't discuss intentions. Just deal with facts. Don't respond to feelings, only to limits. It's a subtle but devastating shift. Here's how it works. If they blame you, asking you to carry emotions that are not yours, ask for specific facts. What exactly do you need to be different? You don't discuss the pain. You just demand clarity. If they throw favors in your face like invisible chains, clear the account immediately. A small refund or a firm refusal. There's no debt without a contract. If they call you selfish to shame your limit, reaffirm the action without emotion. I won't do it today. Silence is stronger than any debate. If they disappear into silence or pressure you urgently, keep your routine intact. Life goes on at your pace, not theirs. At this point, you stop being a piece reacting to moves and become the player turning the board. The game doesn't continue as before, because now there's only one rule: yours. This is how you break manipulation. It's not by facing shouting with shouting, blackmail with blackmail, urgency with urgency. It's by refusing the whole game. The manipulator needs you to join in the play. Without your presence on stage, the theater closes its curtains. Now I want you to think, which of these weapons do they use most against you? Guilt, debt, shame, silence, or urgency? And which will you cut first? Write in the comments. Because choosing where to cut is the first step to taking the throne of your own life. And remember, whoever controls emotions controls the game. Whoever lets the enemy control their reactions will always be subject. Whoever cuts the ropes, whoever tears up invisible contracts, whoever transforms silence into strength and haste into calm, no one will bend. They rule. Have you noticed? Every manipulator relies on the same trick, using your own emotions against you. Guilt traps you. Debt imprisons you. Shame lashes you. Silence freezes you. And urgency blinds you. But the moment you stop reacting, their entire castle crumbles. Machiavelli didn't believe in innocence in the game of power. He knew that those who don't understand the enemy's weapons end up being ruled by them, and that the only way out isn't to demand respect, but to cut every string with cold determination. The secret isn't to confront each manipulation with explanations, but to change the game, to hand responsibility back to those who tried to place the burden on you, to clear the debt you never signed, to transform shame into limits, silence into routine, haste into calm. This is the Machiavellian turn. And when you learn this, you discover something frightening. Power lies not in the voice of the manipulator, but in your ability to avoid the theater. The manipulator only exists as long as you accept the role of puppet. When you cut the strings, they have no performance. Now I want you to reflect. Which of these tactics still holds the most power over you? Guilt, debt, shame, silence, urgency. Write in the comments. Naming the weapon is the first step to destroying it. And if this video opened your eyes, don't forget to subscribe, because here you won't find comforting lessons, but weapons of power. Remember, those who govern themselves cannot be governed, and those who cannot be governed are feared, respected, and never manipulated.